I want you to go on an epic adventure. However, doing so sometimes can be a little bit complicated. So today on the Active Travel Adventures podcast, we're going to go through exactly the 10 steps that you need to take to make sure that your adventure is the trip of a lifetime and fulfills your expectations. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. On today's show, we're going to dig into those 10 questions so that you can have the adventure of a lifetime. Stay tuned. Today, we're going to go through the thought processes of planning and executing an adventure trip. We're going to decide where to go, what goes into actually getting there. So let's go step by step. Number one, first got to figure out where you're going to go. Generally speaking, most of my most recent trips, I've gone to a certain location or done a certain adventure because somebody just said, hey, we're doing this. You want to come? I was like, well, sure. I'm going to take advantage of any opportunity that comes to me whenever possible. I went to Scotland to visit Jamie, who I met in Nicaragua for his birthday party. I went to Glacier with Venti. I met her in France, and she said, hey, I'm going to Glacier. You want to come? I was like, sure, I'd love to go. And next up, I'm going to the Cotswold Way. This one's a little bit different. I was doing some research last winter on the UK's best hikes, came across the Cotswold Way. I was like, oh my gosh, that's next up for me whenever I go back to Europe. So that's actually what I'm getting ready. I'm sitting outside the airport now and getting ready to head over to the UK to do a 100-mile hike in the Cotswold. I'm super excited about that. So there's lots of different ways to find out. Generally speaking, somebody has to bring it into my radar. I don't generally go Googling, places to go or whatnot. So either it's something that somebody's told me about, I've seen on Instagram, or somebody's triggered the thought, hey, let's go there. Then once I decide where I'd like to go, then I got to figure out the next thing. How am I going to do this? Am I going to go on a guided tour, which means that I just pay a company and I push a little button, pay for it, and then I just show up? That's always really nice because there's no work involved. The second option is one that I also do quite frequently, and that's a self-guided tour. Again, I'm using a company. They make all the arrangements. I still push the button, but there's nobody there to hold my hand on the other side outside of a phone call. They're a phone call away if there's a problem. Never had to use it, but for example, again, on this Cotswold, this is a self-guided trip. I push the button, paid for the tour, and a couple weeks later, I get this nice packet in the mail. I get the maps. I get a book. I get the whole itinerary. I get the outline of where I'm staying, a little luggage tag. They move my bags every day. That makes it super easy, but I'm on my own, and I will be going solo, so I don't have other people to travel with. I'll meet people on the trail, of course, but for the most part, I'm on my own. And your other option is to self-plan and to self-tour. You just go through, use my travel planners, use Google, whatever, and you plan your own adventure. A lot more work, may or may not save you money. Sometimes I'm finding that some of these self-guided tours actually save me money because they know of better places than I could find, and I know they save me countless hours. I'm not really big into spending my time planning trips. A lot of people love it. I don't. I'd much rather have somebody do it for me. They already know what they're doing. They know the lay of the land. They know the great places. They know everything. So that's pretty much the way I'm going now. And then I also like to decide, do I want to push myself or am I just going for the beauty? Is this a plus one, what I refer to as the plus one, where I want to challenge myself, or am I just going to go see something pretty? The Cotswold Way that I'm going on, not so difficult, but it's going to be gorgeous. I hope the weather cooperates, but if not, it's still going to be a really, really pretty adventure. Another thing I decide, how much are you willing to rough it? An adventure, sometimes it's luxe, but most of the times it's not. Sometimes you're going to be camping. Sometimes you're going to be in a guest house. Sometimes you'll be in like a hostel or mountain hut kind of a situation where you got a snoring neighbor, so you need to bring eye mask and earplugs and all that kind of thing. So you need to know exactly what you're willing to do. Most of you that have responded to my survey that I encourage you to take at activetraveladventures.com lets me know that you don't mind roughing it if you're going to be seeing something spectacular. Then you got to figure out who's going to carry your junk. Are you backpacking it? Are you going to have it ported for you? Or is a pack animal going to take it for you? Or are you going to do, like I'm doing the Cotswold, well, slack packing it, as what we call it in the Appalachian Trail, where somebody's actually hauling your junk for you. And on this trip, I put a little luggage tag on, I drop it down the lobby at the morning, and then when I arrive later in the day at the next location, my bag's waiting for me. That's kind of a fun way to do it. I'm getting more and more into that, even though I do like to backpack, because there's some places that you just can't see unless you take a backpack. There are no accommodations up there. So you've got to take your accommodations. You've got to take your kitchen. The next big thing to decide is when to go. There's seasonality to almost every place on the earth. Generally speaking, the best times are spring and fall, and I just wish we could do more of that. But there's also the shoulder season for a lot of great places, so the prices are better, the temperatures are better, and the crowds are down. So consider the shoulder seasons, particularly the spring and fall in most cases, and you might get the best of both worlds. Got to look at budget. Is this expensive trip? Adventure travel can be more expensive because the logistics can be difficult. And generally speaking, you got to pay somebody to get you to some of these more difficult places. Is this something you can save up for and do in a year, 2 years, whatever it is? In fact, what I did, and I started maybe 2 years ago, I put a certain amount in the bank like a bill. It gets automatically drafted and goes into my travel bucket. And so every month that goes in, and it's shocking how quickly that can build up. But then what I do, this is my little secret sauce, is I try to, when the bills come in, or when I'm going to do something, I try to cash flow it, meaning I try to pay for it without going into my travel bucket. And so what happens is, unless I get a really massive bill, I can kind of nickel and dime my way to get, buy the plane here, buy this little thing here, get this hotel room there, and that I don't really tackle that travel bucket. So then when I get some really great trip that's going to be expensive, I've got a little kitty in there that I can tap into. That's worked really well for me, not just for travel, but for some other savings things. And when you treat it like a bill, you do it. And so that's, at least for me, that has been super, super effective in helping me build up my little travel kitties and my other little monetary little buckets in my life. When it comes to packing, fortunately, I have all the gear. I don't do a lot of cold weather things because I don't like the cold. But if the weather's at all normal, I've got the gear. But if you don't necessarily have to buy it. You can borrow it or rent it in many cases. In fact, when I went on my safari in Tanzania, I had found out from a local bird watching event that I went to the difference in binoculars. They let us use these Bausch & Lomb binoculars that cost over $800. I was like, oh my word. I had no idea what a difference this made. But I don't need $800 binoculars. But somebody in the group happened to have a good pair. I was like, hey, I'll pay you $50 if I could rent them for 2 weeks. She was thrilled. I was thrilled. Everybody's happy. We've got a gig economy. And you'll be able to pull this off inexpensively without forking up a lot of money for gear you may or may not use in the future. Next is training. Do you have enough time to get ready? I cannot emphasize enough that going on a major adventure without training, you're setting yourself up for not enjoying it as much as you should. Make training a way to have fun exercising because you've got this end goal in mind. Figure out when you're going to go and back into what you have to do. Where I live, where it's super flat, when I'm going to go on a hiking adventure that requires elevation, that means me joining the local rec center, getting on the treadmill with a pack, and doing some 15% grade on the treadmill helps a lot. Donna, who we interviewed for the Iceland trip, her family in Texas, that's flat area, they found a parking garage with like 5 stories, and they would take their pack up and down the stories each weekend. So do yourself a favor, break it down, and then work your plan so that way you're in your best physical shape to thoroughly enjoy the adventure. So it's a challenge, but not killer. You need to decide who you want to go with. Are you going to go by yourself? Are you going to go with family and friends? Do you want to join a group so that you meet other people? In fact, that's a great way, and that's been a super effective way for me to make friends all over the world. So I love that. Mostly I'm traveling solo these days, but I'm not solo. I'm generally with another group, or I'm in a situation where I'm going to be meeting other people. And to me, I generally meet 1 or 2 and become lifelong friends with somebody. In fact, on this Cotswold Way, I'm being met at the airport by a gentleman I met in Scotland the year before on the West Highland Way. So he and his girlfriend are going to host me for a couple of days before I start my journey. You also need to decide when you go someplace, what are you going to do? Do you want to hike? Do you want to bike? Do you want to paddle? Do you want a horseback ride? Do you want to do a combination of all the above? Do you want to add in some culture, some food, and doing a bunch of tasting, wine tasting, touring, voluntourism? That's the new thing where you go there and kind of help out a little bit in addition to seeing the country or the culture. There's different ways of setting up the tours depending on what it is that you want to do. Then the thing that's not my favorite thing to do, but it's important you have to do it, is the logistics. How are you going to get there? Most of the places I go to these days, I have to fly. And I live in a very awkward place to get out of, so it takes me a day to get to a decent airport, and then I fly. But to pick my flight, here's what I do. And this is like the super easy way to get the best rates possible. Google Wiki, W-I-K-I, like Wikipedia, and then the airport code of the place that you're going to. And then you scroll down to the bottom of that page, and it lists all the direct flights coming into it. And so you scan that, and then look for places where you know it's inexpensive for you to get to. So that way you're not going all over the place trying to figure out who the best carrier is to go there. You can go to their website to get their deals. You can also use Google Flights to look for deals and pathways. But it saves you a tremendous amount of effort. I just booked a trip to New Zealand, and there's multiple hundreds of ways to get to New Zealand. But by doing that, I can see, these are the direct routes so that I am on the plane the least amount of time and look for those. I can't go direct from where I live, but I look for the portals of getting there so that I don't have to sit in the plane for a long time and on the active lines. Then you got to look at packing. I'm a big believer in not overpacking. And in fact, I have a packing list I'm happy to share with you that I cultivate. I write down what I put in there, and then when I get home, if I didn't use it, it gets booted for the next list. So my suitcase is really fine-tuned because I don't want to take anything I'm not going to use. Now, there's times when I am filthy, and I've even, in fact, in Nicaragua, we slid down some mountain, the Cerro Negro, where we're literally sliding down on a board of lava ash. I was completely black. The dust was everywhere. I was so filthy that I literally just showered with my clothes on as a first rinse to try to clean those clothes. A lot of times I just wash the clothes in the sink. I bring all performance gear so it dries almost instantly and certainly by the next morning. So that way I bring very little clothes. It's just my gear, the sticks and whatnot. And speaking of sticks, a lot of the stuff we use in adventure travel, you can't bring on carry-on. My sticks have a little metal point and considered a weapon, so I must check them. Also, my little itty-bitty 1-inch blade knife has been confiscated before on me because it too is a weapon. That must be checked. So anyway, I'm happy to share with you my packing list, and in fact, I'll put a link to that on activetraveladventures.com/planning. You'll have a link to my general packing list. So what are your thoughts? Did I miss anything? We've looked at the who, what, where, how, and when of how to do adventure travel. And if you break it down to the easy components, because I know that some of you, a lot of you, like I said, have completed the survey that I have, and I will put a link to that in the show notes as well. I'd love to hear from you because that helps me figure out what I can do to help you get into adventure travel. So today we've decided where we're going to go. Generally speaking, that's usually referrals, whether it's from Active Travel Adventures, your friends, the family, Instagram, or whatnot. We've decided how we're going to do it. Are we going to do it at a guided tour, a self-guided tour? We're going to figure it all out ourselves. We're going to figure out when to go. That's where we use our travel planners. That's when, if you can't find it on there, just email me. I'll do my best to help you. We're figuring out how to pay for it. What's our budget? We're figuring out our gear. How we're going to get it. What do we need to have? Can we borrow, rent it, or buy it? And we've got to train for it so we thoroughly enjoy our trip without killing ourselves. We've got to figure out who are we going with. Are we doing it ourselves, friends, family? Are we going with a group? Are we going to trek along with strangers? And we've got to figure out what activities that we're doing. Are we going to hike, bike, paddle, horseback ride, or do some combination of all the above? Do we want to add in time for cultural and doing a little foodie tour? Do we want to do some voluntourism? And we got to figure out how the heck are we going to get there. Logistics with adventure travel is complicated. That's another reason I like doing tours, because they start and stop you, and they've got the little van to take you so you don't have to backtrack and do little loops all the time. You can go forward. They pick you up and take you to the next destination. So I think in many ways, tours end up being cheaper for you because it's hard to replicate that when you're just a party of one or two. A well thought out and a well planned adventure travel can be a trip of a lifetime. In fact, my friend Jamie, who I interviewed about a year ago and have yet to put on because it's one of my future bonus episodes, he has an expression that I love. This is Jamie from Scotland, the guy that I hiked to his 40th birthday party. He went on a trip, I think it was to Pakistan, and people are like, oh, that's a trip of a lifetime. And he's like, why do we only get to do stuff like that once in a lifetime? And that resonated with me. I'm like, heck yeah, Jamie. I want all of my trips to be a quote-unquote trip of a lifetime. And literally for the last few years, that's what I've been doing. And that's what I want you to do. And you can do it if you do the little step-by-steps, plan it out, put it on the calendar, back into it, and make it happen. You can do it, and I want to hear about your travels. Email me, tell me about your adventures, tell me where you want to go, and tell me how I can help. You can always reach me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. We've looked at what's involved in planning a trip, and in our next episode, I'm going to actually take you on a trip. So I'm going to do something a little different. Normally I give you a report when I get back, but this time I'm going to take you step by step on the actual adventure. So we're going to go through some of the things that we've been through today, and each night I'm going to give you a report of what happened that day. I can't wait to share it with you. We're going to the Cotswold Way in England. And until then, this is Kit Parks, and adventure on.